class. Here is Kaushalya, your English teacher. So, are you all ready? Please take out chapter 2. We have already started the chapter 2, the selfish giant, right? And now I'll explain the chapter. Okay, so please take out your books. Yes, I think you all are ready. So, let us start. Let us read the story of selfish giant who did not like to share, right? So this is the story of selfish giant who didn't like to share. Find out how nature teaches him a valuable lesson. So he has been taught a very valuable lesson. So let us see what happens. Every afternoon as they came from the school, the children would go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood the beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into a delicate blossom of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the tree and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. One day the giant came back. He had gone to visit his friend, right? And had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. What are you doing here? He cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. Right? So, this is the first paragraph, and here the story starts with an afternoon. And when the children come back from the school, they go to the park, right? They go to Giant's garden and they play there, right? It is a very large and lovely garden. It has soft green grass, and the grass is all over there, and there are beautiful flowers like stars, and there are 12 peach trees, right? During the springtime that broke into delicate blossoms or pink or purple, and in autumn season they bore the rich fruit, right? So children are very happy and they like to play in the garden, right? Because the giant was not there. He went to his friend's house and he lived there for 7 years. But when he came back, right, when he came back, he saw the children playing over his garden, right? And he just asked, he didn't like that, right? Because it was his garden and he was out and the children used to play there, so he didn't like that. So he asked the question, what are you doing here? And he cried in a very gruff voice. Now gruff is a rough voice, right? You can say when you're angry, the voice tone, right, it changes. So his tone was rough, it was harsh, because he didn't like the children who were playing in the garden. So the giant was so angry that he told that this is his own garden and it is for himself. So what he did, he just built a high wall around it and put a notice board. As you can see right in your book, trespassers are to be prosecuted. Now here trespasser is one, those who enter without permission, right? Because he was not allowing anyone to enter in his garden, and if someone enters without the permission, right, they will be prosecuted. Now prosecuted means they will be punished, right? So this was the notice board that he hanged, and he didn't allow any of the child to play in his garden. He was very selfish, right? The poor children now had nowhere to play. They didn't had any place to play, right? They were very sad. They tried to play on the streets, but the streets were very dusty and full of hard stones. They did not like it. They used to wander around the high wall when the lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other, right? So as they were not allowed to play in the garden, they tried to play on the street, but it didn't work, right? They were not that happy like they used to be in the past when they used to play in the garden, in the giant's garden, but now they were not allowed to enter the garden. Okay, so kids were very sad. They had no place to play. And then the season of spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the shellfish giant it was still winter, right? Now spring is a season which comes after winter, when the days are much warmer and the plants start to grow, right? So there is spring all over the country, but only the place that is the garden of the giant, doesn't had spring, right? There was winter. There was still winter in there. Why? Let us see. The birds did not care to sing as there were no children in the garden, and the trees forgot to blossom because there were no children, right? And hence the nature was also not supporting the giant, right? The nature wanted to teach giant the lesson, right? And hence the spring didn't come in his garden, right? Once a beautiful flower put a head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board that it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep, right? Even a flower tried to come out, but when he saw the notice board, trespassers will be or would be prosecuted, right? Even he didn't want it to grow, so he slept back. The only people who were least were the snow and the frost, right? So there were only snow and frost in his garden, right? And there were no spring, no blossoms, no flowers, right? So it was winter. It was winter in his garden. The snow covered up the grass with a great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver, right? So there was snow, right? As we see in the winter season, there is snowfall, right? So the snow was still there, right? It was spring, but even though it didn't came in the garden, so there was snow and it covered the whole grass like a cloak. Now here cloak is a long loose garment, right? It is like a coat, right? Loose coat, right? So as it covers the whole body, likewise the snow has covered the grass. And they invited the north wind to stay with them. Now north wind is the wind which blows during the winter season, right? And it is a very cold and harsh wind, and they also invited it to accompany them, which came during the winters only. That also was there in the garden. Now it okay, then they invited the north. He was wrapped in the furs and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down, right? So it was a cold wind, right? And it also blew the chimney pots. The chimney pots, it blew them down. This is a delightful spot, he said. And one day what happened? He was wrapped in furs and he rode all the day about the garden, right? So the north wind was called, and he was wearing the fur, right? And he used to roar all day and he blew the chimney pots. He liked the place so much, right, that he said that this is a delightful spot, and now he wanted to call hail. Now class, have you heard of hail? Right, have you heard of the word hailstorm? Right, now hail are the pieces of ice that fall from the sky like a rain, right? We all have seen them, right? So here he wanted to call hail too, right? Because he liked the spot, right? And then every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle, right? And that hail was also called. He came and he used to rattle, he used to fall every day 3 hours, right? And rattle down on the roofs of the castle. Now hail also broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go, right? So he was dressed in gray and his breath was like ice, right? As hell is a ice pieces, right? The pieces of ice that fall down from the sky, right? So it was falling every 3 hours in a day, right? So it was really cold over the garden, right? Everywhere there was a spring, but here in the garden, right, nature was wanted to punish or wanted to teach a lesson to the giant, and hence it was winter in the garden. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant. And selfish giant was surprised that why the spring is so late. He didn't knew that the spring has already arrived. It is only in his garden that nature doesn't want or doesn't allow spring to come. As he sat in the window, he looked out at his cold white garden. I hope there will be a change in the weather, right? And he sat in the window and saw that the garden was white and cold, and he was hoping that the weather should be changing, right? Now what happened next? Let us see, right? The autumn, the spring never came, nor the summer, right? But he was hoping for the spring, he was hoping for the summer season, but spring never came in his garden. The autumn, now autumn is also season which falls between summer and winter, right? Gave golden fruits to every garden, but the giant's garden, she gave none, right? Even autumn season gave no fruits to the giant's garden. He is too selfish, he said, right? So even season autumn knew that giant is very selfish and he wants to do nothing for others. He doesn't share anything with others, so I'll be not giving him the fruits, right, of my season. So even autumn didn't allow fruits to grow in his garden. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees, right? So there was winter, there were hail, there were north winds, there was storm, right? And the snow, right? Which we see during the winter seasons, right? And there was no spring at all in the garden. In the morning, one morning, what he saw, the giant was lying awake in the bed when he heard of some lovely music, right? And one day what happened in the early morning, he heard of lovely music, right? What happened? Let us see. It was really only a little linnet. Now, what is linnet? Linnet is a small brown bird that makes a pleasant sound, right? As you can see in the picture, right? So it is a linnet which makes beautiful sound. So he heard the music from that bird. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window, but it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in his word, right? So in his word it was so long that he had heard any bird voice, so he was confused about the music. So what happened? Let us see then. It was so long, right? And it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. I believe the spring has come at last, said Giant, and he jumped out of the bed and looked out. And now, when he heard the beautiful music, the sweet music from the bird, he thought that the spring had at last come in his garden. But what did he see? Let us see. He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in and they were sitting on the branches, right? So why was the bird here in his garden, and why there was a spring, the sign of spring in his garden? Because the children has crept inside. The children had came inside from a broken hole, a little hole from the wall, right? And that's why the spring has also entered with the children, right? So that is how the spring entered. Now let us see what will the giant do, whether he will be throwing children out again or whether he will be allowing them to play, right? That we'll see in the next period. For now, your homework is to read the chapter till we done. Okay, I hope you have understood what I have taught, right? Please read the chapter so that you can understand the chapter more easily. Thank you.